I wasn't on the guest list, not for a stranger's wedding, not for some exclusive gala, but for my own brother's Navy award ceremony, the one my parents planned, attended, and photographed, like it was the coronation of a king. And as I stood outside the gates of the Naval War College, the salty Rhode Island air sharp in my lungs, a young officer looked down at his tablet and said with sterile precision, "Sorry, ma'am, Lauren Mitchell isn't on the list." Not a mistake. A message. Just 2 hours earlier, I had decrypted an active cyber threat that would have sunk a U.S. destroyer. Now I was invisible again. But they had no idea. Today, the woman they erased was about to make them remember. Forever. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the list." Those words didn't just sting, they hollowed me out, and the young security officer didn't mean to humiliate me. He was just doing his job. He didn't know that my parents had intentionally left my name off that list. Didn't know that the man being honored today was my younger brother. Didn't know that I was the one who'd kept him alive. The breeze off the harbor at the Naval War College snapped at my trench coat, tugging at the edges, like even the wind wanted to expose me. Underneath the coat was my truth, the stark white uniform, the silver stars pinned to each shoulder. Rear Admiral, one of the youngest in Navy history. And still to them, I was just Lauren, the spinster, the paper pusher, the cautionary tale. I watched as the glossy black SUV pulled up to the entrance. Ethan Rhodes stepped out glowing in his dress whites. Picture perfect, handsome, arrogant. He threw a smirk toward the gate, saw me standing there. His wife Rachel followed him out, her hand on his arm, like they were royalty arriving at court. Then, with the casual cruelty of someone who'd practiced it his whole life, he leaned over and said loud enough for the guard and me to hear, "She should have married someone in uniform, not a desk job." My spine stiffened, but I didn't flinch, I didn't blink. I watched as my father, Colonel David Ramirez, marched past me without acknowledgement. My mother Maria avoided my gaze completely, her face a mask of mild concern, like maybe she smelled something unpleasant and couldn't place it. No one said my name, no one stopped. I wasn't surprised. I'd been trained for this moment in silence, years of being sidelined, overlooked, made into the family ghost. But today, something cracked open. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was colder than that. Sharper, a kind of surgical calm, the kind I only ever felt in the war room when lives depended on what I saw that others missed. They thought today was about Ethan. They had no idea. The first time I disappeared from my family was at a backyard barbecue. I was 17. It was summer in Virginia, sticky air fireflies, the smell of burnt hot dogs. Ethan had just gotten his acceptance letter to the Naval Academy. My dad bought 2 dozen American flags to line the driveway. My mom ordered a sheet cake that said, "To the future of the Rhodes legacy." There was beer brass and a backyard full of retired Marines. Ethan stood tall, basking in the glow of generations of military pride. And me, I had just won first place at the National STEM Research Fair for an encryption algorithm I built in my bedroom. I tried to show my dad the medal. He took it, barely looked up from the grill. "Good job, kiddo," he muttered before turning to Ethan. "Son, you'll need to start running more. Plebe summer won't be forgiven." That night, I placed my medal in an old cigar box beneath my bed, next to a dried prom corsage and a silver dollar Grandpa left me. It never came out again. Years later, when I told my family I'd been accepted into the Naval Intelligence Program, I watched my father's jaw clench. "That's support work," he said, the word tasting foul in his mouth. "Rhodes men serve on the front lines, not behind a desk." My mom tried to smooth it over. "Well, maybe it's safer for her," she offered gently, as if I were some delicate vase too fragile to ship. I didn't tell them that the program I joined was more dangerous than most battlefield units, that I was trained not just to analyze data, but to shape it to lead digital operations so sensitive they barely had names. I stopped sharing after that, and yet I never stopped listening, especially to Ethan. He'd call me from his deployments, tossing around jargon he barely understood, asking me to explain intelligence briefings he never read. Sometimes I'd slip him guidance quietly, strategically disguising it as advice from someone in admin. He never thanked me, didn't have to. It wasn't about him knowing, it was about keeping him adept. But there comes a time when invisibility stops being noble, and starts becoming self-betrayal. Today felt like the edge of that line, and for the first time in years, I was ready to cross it. They say the most powerful rooms are the quietest. That's why we call it the tank. Buried 4 levels below the Pentagon, my battlefield has no windows, no sunlight, no oxygen that hasn't passed through 7 layers of filters. Just walls of blinking monitors, satellite feeds, encrypted chat streams, and silence except when it matters. And when it matters, we move like a symphony. That Tuesday night, while Ethan was probably watching ESPN with a beer in hand, I was coordinating a live rescue op off the Somali coast. A commercial cargo vessel had been boarded, hostages on deck, heat signatures flaring red against the black background of the screen. Our team's job makes sure the Navy SEALs going in had eyes on every threat before they kicked down a single door. I called out movements in calm clip commands, Viper 1 hold position, unidentified skiff approaching port side, stern, no maritime registry, eagle eye give me thermal on the aft stairwell, confirm presence of small arms deck level 3. My voice stayed level even when my pulse threatened to shatter glass. That night we found the second ambush, 6 more hostiles hidden in a cold fishing boat, waiting for our team to breach. I called it off seconds before they would have walked into a kill box. 12 American lives saved because I saw what they couldn't. And just as I issued the abort call, my personal cell, tucked deep into my uniform, buzzed. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It was a text from Ethan. Hope you're enjoying your long weekend, sis, still buried in budget spreadsheets. I stared at the screen. The irony nearly knocked the air from my lungs. That mission, the one I'd just saved his name, had come across our encrypted comms hours earlier. Ethan Rhodes said he was part of the carrier strike group stationed nearby. He had no idea his desk jockey sister had just kept him from walking into a death trap. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I turned off the phone and refocused on the operation. But something shifted inside me that night, not resentment, not bitterness, clarity. My family didn't know who I was, not really. But soon they would. General Catherine Hale didn't knock when she walked into my office. She never did. She simply appeared crisp, commanding, with that quiet, dangerous kind of authority that never had to announce itself. Her silver hair was pulled back into a low bun, and her eyes, sharp steel blue, scanned the room like she was still on recon. Lauren, she said, tossing a manila folder onto my desk. You're about to make some people very uncomfortable. Good. I blinked. Excuse me, she sat across from me, crossed one leg over the other, and nodded toward the folder. Inside were documents I hadn't seen in years. Operation Silent Rook, my most classified work. A 5-year cyber intelligence campaign that unraveled an international weapons trafficking ring operating through encrypted civilian satellites. Quiet surgical work, quiet until now. It's being declassified, she said. Just the parts we can afford to share. Your name's attached. I couldn't speak for a moment. I'd stopped dreaming of recognition years ago. General Hale leaned forward, voice lower now. I've watched you work miracles in a box underground while men like your father act like you're in charge of a paper jam. She gave a half smile. That ends now. And then she said it. Your brother's award ceremony this weekend, right? My pulse ticked up. Yeah. How do you know that I know everything? She said simply, and I've made a few calls. There's going to be a second name announced that day. She paused. Yours? I froze. Ma'am, that's his moment. He doesn't even want me there. She held my gaze unblinking. He doesn't want you there because he's never had to look up at you. Let him. It was the boldest thing anyone had ever offered me. And the scariest. She stood to go. You won't need to say a word, Lauren. You've already done the work. Let the silence speak for you. And just like that, she was gone. I sat still for a long time, staring at the folder. At my name, Rear Admiral Lauren Mitchell, on page 1. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a secret. I felt like a weapon someone had just decided to aim. The silence before the impact is always the sharpest. I stood just behind the main stage at the Naval War College's marble-columned auditorium. Through the curtain, I could see the rows of uniforms, the tight formations of family members. I spotted Rachel first, poised, polite, perfect. Then my mother's meticulous curls, the string of pearls she always wore for big events. My father sat stiff as a statue, and Ethan centered, confident, shining. I adjusted the wax cuffs of my uniform. The two silver stars on my shoulders caught the stage light filtering in. My hands didn't shake. The announcer stepped up to the podium. For meritorious service in support of combat operations, the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal is awarded to Lieutenant Ethan Rhodes. Thunderous applause. Ethan rose like he was ascending a throne. He walked with that unmistakable stride, equal parts ego and ease. His speech was smooth practiced, lined with every buzzword our father drilled into us. Honor, sacrifice, lineage. And he nodded to our dad with reverence, to our mom with warmth, to Rachel with performative adoration. He never mentioned me, not once. And then the moment came. The applause faded, and before the MC could close the ceremony, another figure walked onto the stage. General Catherine Hale. The room shifted. People sat straighter, murmurs cut off mid-syllable. A four-star general speaking off script was no small thing. "We have an additional honor to bestow," she said, her voice clear and calm. "One not previously announced due to national security classifications." The crowd leaned forward. "We recognize a leader whose strategic command of Operation Silent Rook not only dismantled an international trafficking network, but directly prevented the loss of over 5,000 civilian lives and multiple military assets." My father turned to Ethan, confused. Rachel's expression froze. Then she said it. "Rear Admiral Lauren Mitchell, please step forward." The room went still. I walked out into the light. The wave of gasps was almost tidal. Uniformed officers stood immediately protocol. Yes, but also something else. Recognition, respect. I walked past my family without a glance. I heard my father's whisper to Ethan Admiral. I stood beside General Hale as she pinned the Navy Distinguished Service Medal onto my chest. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel erased. I felt inevitable. They cornered me at the reception like a pack that had just discovered its prey wasn't who they thought. It happened near the drink table beneath a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace. I was mid-conversation with the senior intelligence director when I felt it an unmistakable shift in temperature. My family had arrived. Ethan came first, his face was pale, jaw tight. My father trailed a step behind arms crossed, eyes unreadable. My mother, for once, did not smile. "You lied to us," Ethan hissed. No greeting, no congratulations, just fury raw and unfiltered. 15 years. You let us believe you were an analyst, a glorified typist. I didn't respond, not yet. You let me stand up there and thank the family like some damn fool. You let me talk about honor when you were the one who... He stopped, choking on the words. My father said nothing, not even to defend him. I turned toward General Hale, standing by a fireplace across the room. She met my eyes. A subtle nod. That was all I needed. A junior officer appeared at my elbow. "Ma'am, there's a conference room available if you'd prefer privacy." "Thank you," I said smoothly. "Let's go." Inside the quiet closed room, Ethan let loose. "You humiliated us," he said, pacing. "You made us look like fools in front of the Navy, in front of the world." "No," I said calmly. "You did that when you made me invisible." He stopped moving. I looked at my father. "Did you ever once ask me what I did? Or were you so sure that anything not in combat couldn't possibly matter?" His face stayed hard, but something in his eyes wavered. I turned to my mother. "And you? How many times did you ask me when I'd settle down, find a man, start a family, before ever asking if I was proud of my own life?" She didn't respond. Tears had started forming, but I didn't flinch. I drew in one breath, one I'd waited years to take. "I didn't lie to you. I just stopped explaining myself to people who never intended to understand." Ethan sat down, deflated. My father looked older than I'd ever seen him, and then sharp and distinct my encrypted phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Operation Alert. I stood. "I have to take this." I walked to the door, paused. "I love you all. But if there's going to be a future between us, it starts with respect." Then I left them in the silence they built. 6 months later, I walked into my parents' house on a quiet Sunday afternoon, and something stopped me cold. It was the cabinet. New handcrafted stained mahogany, positioned right beneath the living room portrait wall. Inside, meticulously arranged my grandfather's with two medals, my father's Marine Corps ribbons, and right in the center, my Navy Distinguished Service Medal. It sat in a velvet cradle beneath a framed photo of me in full dress whites, shaking hands with General Hale on stage at the Naval War College. It took me a second to breathe. He built it himself, my mother said, gently stepping out from the kitchen with a plate of warm cookies, her classic chocolate chip recipe. Took him 3 weekends, said it was time the display told the whole story. Not the story of the men, not just combat. The whole story. At dinner, the air was different. No tension, no rivalry. My father, clearing his throat, looked across the table at me, not with reluctance, but curiosity. Lauren, he said carefully, like the name was new, how do you handle morale when you've got civilian analysts reporting to 4-star officers? That can't be easy. A real question. We talked for 20 minutes. Ethan listened quietly, his fingers drumming on his glass. When the meal was done, he asked if I wanted to sit outside for a minute. Just the two of us, like we used to when we were kids on the porch swing. We didn't say much at first, just sat and watched the sun stretch long over the backyard, the cicadas humming like distant applause. Then softly, Ethan said, I was awful to you. I turned. He didn't look at me, just stared out at the tree line. All those years I needed to be the hero. I needed Dad to look at me like I mattered. And you were doing the work in silence. I mocked what I didn't understand. I was scared, I think, that maybe you were braver than I ever could be. He looked at me, eyes rimmed red, and you were. I let the silence sit between us, not as a wall, but as a space being cleared. I'm proud to be your brother Lauren, he said. I smiled, slow and real. And I'm proud to be your sister. It wasn't triumph I felt, it was peace. Some victories are loud salutes, medals, roaring applause. Mine was quiet, not because it lacked power, but because I chose when, where, and how the truth was spoken. Lauren Mitchell's journey was never about revenge. It was about reclamation, about redefining family dignity and worth, not by demanding recognition, but by becoming undeniable. Her story reminds us silence doesn't mean weakness, and visibility is not the same as value. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or told that your way of serving, loving, or leading wasn't enough, let this be your reminder. Your truth doesn't need permission, it only needs the right moment. We tell stories like Lauren's because somewhere someone is still waiting for their name to be spoken aloud. If you saw yourself, your strength, your silence, your fight in this story, we'd love to hear from you. Drop your thoughts below, and if you want more stories that cut deep and heal strong, subscribe to Chosen Revenge. Your voice matters here. Your experience is not invisible. We'll be waiting with the next story.